And good morning, Santa Barbara and the Central Coast. I'm Mark McIntire, this week's host for Voices of Santa Barbara. Today, of course, the little bit left of June gloom. I think June is going to be with us for another week, and then she's going to go away. I sort of like June gloom because it reminds me of my Aunt Marion, who always used to stay with us a week longer than she said. So the Weather Channel promises us that we'll be rid of all that. But I'm from Boston. I love fog and rain and mist. I like to go walking in it. I like to go romping in it. I like the feeling of it. I love it. 25 years of drought has driven me absolutely crazy. Say, folks, thank you for listening to us here in Voices of Santa Barbara, AM 1290 KZSB, where we bring you the finest in interviews and guests on the Central Coast. And today, of course, is no exception because we have with us the hero of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, former English professor for many years at Santa Barbara City College, Celeste Jarrett. Celeste, welcome back to Voices of Santa Barbara.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's always a joy to be here with you.
Do you like the rain and the mist and you like all this stuff too? Huh?
I love it. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, lived in Long Island.
Wow.
I miss the season, so
Right.
This is great, and my plants love it.
Right. Now, for the 17 of you out there who are listening who don't know who Celeste Jarrett is, no, it's only 15. Now, we actually educated 2 people. So for the 15 of you who don't know who Celeste Barrett, Celeste Barrett was a girlfriend of mine, by the way. Celeste Barber, that was high school, my gosh. Celeste Barber, longtime English professor, and she ran a program called The Great Books of the Western World Curriculum. And, of course, the college has disposed of that. They don't teach that anymore because they're now against the Western civilization. They want to replace it with total Marxism. But while she was there, many of us participated. And I just want to publicly thank you on behalf of all the students who have profited for running that curriculum. It was a wonderful thing. And I just want to say many people have written to me after they graduated and transferred to other colleges and universities who said that because of that program, because they were required to read the classics in Western civilization. And I said, well, you got to thank Celeste Barber for that. So there you go.
I appreciate that.
Oh, you should. Anyway, let's start off with our first topic. Celeste is not only is she a professor of English and literature, but she's also an authoress. And she wrote a book called Ghosts of East Berlin. And this book is about the time she spent behind the Iron Commie Curtain. Yes. And so I want to start off our discussion today with how did living in communist East Germany lead to your deeper understanding of what it means to live in America?
Well, first, in 1988, my late husband and my 10-year-old son and I, we were among the first ordinary Americans to be invited over there through a Fulbright teaching exchange that Frank participated in. By first ordinary Americans, I mean those not affiliated with the State Department or the American Communist Party. So we were pretty much thrown in there. And I'll tell you, I could talk the entire time we have on the radio just answering that one question. But for me, I think it comes down to one thing. We as Americans have the Bill of Rights. The East Germans and the Soviet bloc did not. And that's the big distinction. For them, it was freedom from. For us, it is freedom to. For them, freedom from not being employed, not having health insurance, not having a roof over your head, so on and so forth.
Not having a government education. That's right.
Not having a government education.
Right.
But for us, it's the freedom too. I mean, we think of it in terms of, freedom of speech, freedom to travel.
Right.
But there's also, I think importantly, because these are 2 different economic systems, we have the freedom to fail and the freedom to succeed, the pursuit of happiness. And I think we forget about that. In East Germany, no one was permitted to fail, which meant, equality of outcomes, which meant nobody was permitted to succeed.
And certainly nobody was able to excel to their maximum capability.
No, and so we all know famously about the lack of a work ethic in communist countries, because no matter how hard you work, how gifted you are, it's never appreciated because it's always at the expense of someone else.
Right.
And so I really came to appreciate the fact that Americans, more than any other people, have this thing called self-initiative. The right to succeed, the right to succeed success, but also the right not to.
Right.
And I appreciate that, and we should all appreciate that. We should cherish it. And it's under the gun right now, as you know, Mark. Is that an answer to your question?
No, that's a good general answer. We're going to be referring to your book quite a bit during the show. There's some passages that I've highlighted here. We're also going to be talking about an event coming up on the 4th of July, correct? We're going to be talking about that?
Yes. One of the things that ordinary folk, ordinary Americans are concerned with is they feel they're so disconnected from their government, especially here in California. Well, you don't have to be wallpaper, folks. You can stand up, you can take charge, and one of the things you can do is on our national birthday, the 4th of July, come out for the 4th of July parade. There's a grassroots group, Santa Barbarans United for the U.S., meet at noontime, Mitchell-Terena and State Street. What they'd like you to do is wear a white T-shirt, white or blue pants, and blue jeans. Bring a flag if you have it. If not, there's a wonderful donor who donated 100 flags. And march with this group. Bring your kids. Bring a stroller. Come in a wheelchair. Everybody welcome.
Skateboard,
roller skate. Everybody.
Sled,
We'd like to see Americans come out in pride, standing up for their country, for the values that our country stands for. So please, July 4th, noontime.
Mitchell-Terena
and State. And if you want more information, contact Rhonda at 805-259-6097. And I'll be in the parade, too.
We're going to repeat this during the broadcast because, it takes people 7 times before they hear something, before they act on it.
This is a good thing to do.
It's a good thing to do. And now this is part of the regular 4th of July parade?
It's the regular 4th of July parade, which I believe is sponsored by Pierre Claeson's group.
Yes.
Yes. Wonderful, wonderful veterans group here in town.
Certainly worthwhile. And it's a nonpartisan event. You don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We even welcome communists if a communist want to come down. Right?
You can be anybody who loves and cherishes this country.
That's right.
No age limit.
And appreciates the fact that you can be anything in this country and still be an American.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So let's get back to your book, and let's get back to the days when you were living behind the Iron Curtain in East Berlin. Why did you go to East Berlin? Was that where the Fulbright was designating you to go with your husband?
It was. And in fact, back in 1987, when Frank's department chair approached him, it was kind of like a booby prize. Nobody wanted it. English professors like to go to Florence, London, wonderful
Oxford.
places like that.
Go to Oxford, you see, of course.
And East Germany, nobody wanted it. So I figured, I think when they went to Frank, when Porter Abbott approached him, it was a joke. And Frank brought it home to me in that spirit. And I looked at it and I said, you have to do this. You have to do this. And I had 2 reasons. One was, how often do you get invited to live in a communist country?
Right.
I thought this would be great. This would be great for my 10-year-old son, Eric.
Right.
What an experience. But the other reason is, I'm a baby boomer. I grew up with duck and cover. I grew up in the Cold War. And I didn't want my son to have to continue with that legacy. And I thought, if we can go there, maybe we can show them that Americans are great people, and we could see the humanity in East German citizens as well. And maybe it was naive, but I thought we can put a little chink in that wall. And this was before Reagan came out with his famous tear down that wall.
Right.
And I like to think that we were part of that endeavor. So it was actually a patriotic act for us to go there. It was terrifying, I have to tell you. When we got off that plane.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
How long did the Fulbright fellowship last? Was it one summer?
It was spring semester.
spring semester.
We were there
16
months.
weeks.
Yep, we were there 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And Frank taught 2 classes. Of course, his students were hand selected because they Humboldt University didn't want an American professor soiling them.
No,
so these were all communists.
The commissar of education.
With a Stasi in every classroom, by the way.
Oh, no kidding. There was a Stasi. If you don't know what a Stasi is the secret police, okay? The equivalent to the KGB.
Yeah, but they were ordinary. 25% of the population, it's estimated, was employed by the Stasi.
25%?
25%.
I never knew that. I never knew that.
You know it now.
I guess I do. All right, good place to take our first break. You're listening to AM 1290 KZSB. I'm Mark McIntire, your host for this episode of Voices of Santa Barbara. Stay with us. We have a lot more to talk about when we come back. And welcome back to Voices of Santa Barbara. I'm here today with former English professor Celeste Barber, and we're covering a whole waterfront of topics. Namely, we're discussing her book, now that she is retired from Santa Barbara City College, Ghosts of East Berlin. This documents when her family lived behind the Iron Curtain. This is before Ronald Reagan issued that famous dictum, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Yeah. So you convinced your husband, Frank, that...
he didn't take much convincing.
He didn't take much convincing. Yeah, well, it was a whole semester out of the country. And as you pointed out in our first segment, who doesn't want to leave America to go see what the other half is looking like, right? So let me ask you, now you've got your feet on the ground. You landed in Berlin, right? So you're in Berlin.
Yes.
What was the first thing that you noticed as a cultural adjustment? Because it's in the book. But what was the first thing that really struck you? Go ahead.
Well, my memory of it is, remember, I went there as a housewife, a mother. How do I shop in a communist country?
Right, when there's nothing to buy.
When there's nothing to buy.
And no place to buy it.
Yes. And that was a major.
Really?
I mean, there were plenty of potatoes, pork, green beans, apples, and lots of beer.
So you'd walk into a store, right?
Yes.
And what about the shelves? What struck you about the shelves?
Well, it was like walking into a 7-Eleven, about the size of a 7-Eleven, nothing colorful, no choices, nobody happy.
Right.
And pretty much potatoes, cabbage, pork, apples, and that's
World War
some
II
other
diet.
things.
That's the diet the Germans
It is.
had in World War II.
But I came prepared. I brought along my Betty Crocker cookbook because I figured you can do lots of different things with Betty Crocker.
Right.
But the first thing I remembered was I thought, well, I'll make a hamburger. They did have ground beef.
Oh, they did? Okay, good.
But I didn't realize that you had to mix fat with the beef.
It was
here the butchers do it for you.
Right.
So I took it home and I tried frying it, and it was a total disaster. And then I realized you have to go in and say so much fat, so much Schaberfleisch. But that was a real challenge. And I do remember one day when Eric was at his school downtown, he said, Mom, I saw a whole bunch of people queuing up to buy something.
Right.
And it didn't matter what they were buying. I had to have it. So I took the 40-minute drive by the Underground train.
40 minutes.
40 minutes to get downtown. I actually found the line by Alexanderplatz, got in line, stood there for about another...
And you had no idea what you were in line for?
No idea what I was in line for. With all these other Hausfraus. I stood there for about another 45 minutes and came out with 2 jars of Polish pickles, made my way home. But the punchline to the story is my family was thrilled. They hadn't seen a pickle in weeks.
And, of course, all of you housewives out there and housefraus and all of you male chefs out there realize that a pickle has absolutely zero nutritional value. In fact, you'll lose weight if you just eat pickles because you have to go. Right. But these were Polish pickles, right?
These were Polish pickles.
Were they any good?
They were really quite good, quite good.
Were they dill or just regular pickles?
Dill.
No, they were dill pickles. Okay. So, all right. So, shopping was an eye opener for you. Do you recall what your son Eric's biggest cultural adjustment was? I think it's early in the book. I know it's a little difficult to talk about, but
Do
you're
I
an
have
English
to talk
professor.
about it?
You're an English professor. You could go ahead and talk.
You're
Okay.
not talking about the German toilet.
Yes. I'm talking.
dear.
That was my favorite part of the whole book. Yeah. Now, let me, without going into any detail, we don't want to detail. I mean, people are still having breakfast, and they're preparing for lunch. But the peculiar thing was that he couldn't figure it out for a while.
No,
Right.
the German toilet is unique.
Yeah. And so if you haven't been to Germany, and if you don't intend to go, Google it. Ask the great goddess Google, because now we've identified the proper gender of Google. It's not a man. It's a woman. Well, we think it's a woman. It could be a transgendered woman, but we don't really know. But ask Google about German toilets, and you'll see what we're talking about.
The only hint I'll give you is it has a little shelf on it.
And it doesn't look like a toilet.
No.
No. It doesn't look like that. Right. Okay. So if you happen to see one of these things in Germany, you'll know what to do with it, right? So consult the great goddess Google, and you'll be able to get that. Now, in this segment, I just wanted to ask you another question, and that is that you and I have spent so many years at Santa Barbara City College, and these were golden years in terms of students being taught history, Western civilization,
Yes.
and civics. Today, that's no longer the case. And it's not just at Santa Barbara City College, it's everywhere. Cultural Marxists have taken over academia. Now, how do you recommend that our students today get the kind of civics education and Western civilization education that they really need to understand their own history and their own background? What do you recommend?
That's an excellent question. And I'd like to address it in terms of high school students, if that's all right. Because
Absolutely.
any high school student who would actually ask that question is already a wonderful person,
Yeah.
in my opinion. And what I would say to that student is take the initiative, be an American, and I would suggest you form a club on campus called the Civics Club.
Oh, good idea.
Yes.
Good idea. Very
Begin
good
every
idea.
meeting
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a flag in the room and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
I'd appreciate it very much.
Right.
But a civics club, you will find at least one teacher on that campus, probably an older teacher, who would gladly be your sponsor. And then take responsibility. Join the student government. Have your members regularly attend, perhaps one or two each week, these school board meetings, the county school board meetings. Follow what's going on in the state assembly, at the state level, what's going on with education, and report back. Become knowledgeable. That's what I would say is to begin there, to begin your own civics education and take charge. It's a good place to start.
And wouldn't be a bad idea if parents were to take their young kids to Board of Supervisors meetings, to meetings of various city councils in the area, and also to the school boards. Take the kids to these meetings and find out who's in charge, what their policies are, what their philosophy of education is, what their philosophy of civics is, what their philosophy of history is, and Western civilization, and your eyes will be opened.
And if you don't like it, parents, just say no.
And another reason we have Celeste Barber, if you don't know who she is in terms of the hero of the pledge, on January 24th, I believe it was, you appeared before the Board of Trustees of Santa Barbara City College, and you requested that actually you didn't even request, you just started to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, since they weren't doing it, and the reason they weren't doing it was, according to Mr. Miller, who was the chair of the president of the Board of Trustees, in his view, his arbitrary and capricious view, the Pledge of Allegiance is a racist idea, and so he canceled the pledge. But you stepped forward. You had your own little flag, and you raised your little flag, and you tried to recite the the Pledge of Allegiance. Then what happened?
I did recite it.
Yeah.
I did. They didn't shout me down, but there was one faculty member in particular who incited others. I was screamed at. Students and others stomped at their feet. They attempted to intimidate me. It was terrifying. But I stood my ground. No one will ever stop an American in this country from reciting the pledge, singing the anthem, stating that we love this country and we're proud of it. Cannot be permitted ever.
Yeah, and if you'd like to watch this scenario, just go on YouTube and Google Celeste Barber, Santa Barbara City College Board of Trustees, January 24.
And I'll tell you, if they feel that it's so racist, it's so hateful, they should have experienced what we did in East Berlin for 6 months. We talked about the funny things. There were other things that were not
Funny.
Not funny.
And we're going to talk
serious.
about that after we take our break, which we can probably do now. You're listening to Voices of Santa Barbara. I am Mark McIntire, your host. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Say, listen, folks, we're really happy that you are joining us here on Voices of Santa Barbara. I'm having an interesting conversation with a friend of mine from our teaching days together at Santa Barbara City College. Her name is Professor Celeste Barber. She's now retired. And we're discussing her book that she wrote with her son. And it's called Ghosts of East Berlin. And it documents the one semester that she spent with her husband and her son in East Germany at Humboldt University. And during the break, when you were listening to commercials, we were discussing, I was not aware that the Humboldt University, well, you tell it. What is Humboldt University in Germany, in East Germany?
Well, Humboldt University was one of the East German schools. It's not to be confused with our California State University here.
Thank you.
That was a German school, and it's actually at the same place where the infamous Nazi book burning took place in the 1930s, and they have a plaque there for that. We stood right there. But book banning was still in effect when we lived there in East Germany for a very different reason, because it was an attempt to protect the citizens from contaminated ideas, ideas that they believe were harmful to the people, Western ideas of liberty, justice.
So you brought some American books. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, the Fulbright and the USIA people gave Frank enough money so he could purchase a number of books, the Norton Anthology of American Literature. He brought The Great Gatsby and also Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn for his students. And we were thrilled. The students were actually thrilled, but right after they were delivered, the officials at the school took them and locked them up.
In a cabinet?
Yeah. They were locked up so they can only be checked out by certain people at certain times. And of course, the people checking them out would have been checked themselves.
Right.
So you have to be careful what kind of books you're reading there.
Right.
So, people who criticize what's going on in this country understand what the alternative is to a free, open society.
So let me understand this. First of all, how old were the students that Frank was teaching?
They were college students.
So 18
to 22 years old. They were all, of course, members of the Communist Party, because those are the only students who could get a college education.
I see.
So
you had to be a member of the party
yes,
to get a college education.
Yes, you did.
I see. Okay. And so did they have unfettered access to these books that Frank brought?
No, of course not.
Well,
no.
So were the books ever used?
I don't know. I don't know. I assume they were in the classes, but they were very closely guarded. And of course, Frank taught 2 classes. The students were, selected specifically.
Right.
And in both of his classes, we knew there was at least one student there who worked for the Stasi.
Now,
we knew that.
Yeah, the Stasi is the equivalent of the KGB.
Secret police.
Secret police.
Yes. But the difference is KGB, these are people like Putin.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about with Stasi, you had the high-ranking Stasi, but it's estimated 25% of the population worked for the Stasi.
Now, the Stasi was
Ordinary
infamous for
people.
reporting you. If your neighbor, let's say that lived in the next flat, heard you reading Dostoevsky or reading Mark Twain, then you
You're
could
gone.
get reported to the Stasi. And let's say that your neighbor was a Stasi member, you would go. They would go to the secret police headquarters. They'd report you, and action would be taken against you.
That actually happened to someone we knew. We had a
tell
favorite.
me.
We
Tell
had
me
a
about
favorite
that.
beer stuba, and
who? A what?
Bierstube, like a pub.
Oh, a
And
Bierstube.
a Bierstube.
After the Bierstube.
And one of our waiters there was a young fellow, and he was just intrigued by us and intrigued by American rock and roll. And I had brought over some wonderful CDs.
Oh, yeah?
Dire Straits, Eric
Yeah,
Clapton, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Phil Collins. And so he invited us to come over to his flat, which was the building next to ours. One night, we were going to bring our cassettes in those days. And we showed up with Eric in tow. Nobody answered the door. Nobody answered. And I had a bad feeling. And the next day when we went back to the Bierstube, he was gone.
Just disappeared.
He just disappeared.
Did you ever hear from him again?
Nope.
No.
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 And for listening to American rock and roll, he just disappeared.
No, not for listening to rock and roll because they had access to it from
Yeah.
from West Berlin,
Yeah.
but because he was meeting with
meeting
Americans, with Americans. When Frank's colleagues at Humboldt would get together with him, they never did it one-on-one, except for the chair of the English department.
Right.
It was always en masse. I had a birthday party for Frank.
Right.
They all came together. They all left together.
Wow.
So it was very difficult to make friendships there.
Well, friends, if out there, if you are as horrified as I am about these recollections of what it's really like to meet a real communist, there's an event on July 4th that's going to be happening here in Santa Barbara that we can show our appreciation for living in America in a free society where you're not reported for associating with foreigners. So, again, Celeste, will you tell us about this event on July 4th?
Yeah, I would actually encourage, anybody listening here, take your friends, family, kids, grandparents, and join with a grassroots group, Santa Barbarans United for the United States. Meet at noon at Mitchell Terrena and State Street. Wear a white shirt and blue jeans or blue pants. Bring a flag or not, they'll have flags for you. And march together. Again, bring strollers, bring wheelchairs,
Skateboards,
bring your
anything.
joy, and show your pride. Imagine if 1,000 people showed up marching in celebration of our birthday, our founders, and our wonderful values. We cannot take them for granted ever. They're under threat, and this is a way of standing up to those who would denounce our flag, our Constitution, our founders, our values, our culture. Please do it. July 4th, noon.
At State Street and Mitchell Terrena?
And Mitchell Terrena.
There's a park there. No, there's not a park there. There's a church there. There's a church
Just
there.
a block off.
Right,
Yeah.
off from the park. So if you want to do that, and by the way, this is nonpartisan, has nothing to do with the politics that's going on in our country. It's an effort really to remind us that we're all in this together. We're all Americans, despite
Americans and those who want to be Americans.
and
You
those
don't
who
have
want
to be a citizen
Americans.
to march.
Exactly. You don't have to be a citizen to march. No, and non-citizens are welcome. Absolutely, because they should.
If I could say one other thing,
of course. Yeah.
we were there for the May Day parade in East Berlin.
Yeah, oh wow, that should be. Interesting.
That's International Workers' Day,
Right.
and we watched it from his chairman's flat because it was right on the main route there. And the interesting thing about that parade is everybody was all the workers were required to march. So the only people left watching them were retirees, Stasi, and the Americans like us.
And probably little kids.
Imagine that, a country where you are required to march.
Yeah.
Nobody stays home.
Yeah. Well, I guess now we know why communism doesn't work. The sad thing, though, is that there are people in this country who they use the word socialism. But I define socialism as a nation or a country where everything is free except you. You're not free. You're not
Good
free.
answer.
You're not free to. Socialism means you're not free to earn as much money as you can, spend it wherever you like. associate with whoever you want. And if you own a bakery, you're free to bake a cake or not bake a cake, depending upon whether or not your customers are people of character that you approve of. And that's
why, Mark, it's not a coincidence that at the same time these people are saying we want socialism, they are attacking the Bill of Rights. Chiefly, I would say, the First Amendment. They do not like the Bill of Rights. And they're going after it. They don't like the Constitution.
Well, in our next segment, we're going to be referring to an article that you and I talked about in the green room before our broadcast here. And so there's something going on here. There's some strange, clever maneuver by the socialists, I call them cultural Marxists, to actually hijack free speech as it's contained in the Constitution and replace it with something called free expression. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at an article written by Arthur Minich, and he's with the Heritage Foundation. So probably it's a good idea to take our next break. Just to remind you, this is KZSB AM 1290. I'm Mark McIntire, your host, and please stay with us. And we are back, actually. Welcome back. I'm Mark McIntire, your host today for Voices of Santa Barbara. In studio, we have Celeste Barber, former English professor and literature professor. And we were discussing her book that she wrote with her son, Eric, Ghosts of East Berlin. And we probably are going to switch gears right now because I did have one anecdote. Just tell us about that woman that, as you were leaving East Berlin, that lady that you were saying goodbye to, who managed to avoid the Stasi and associate with you in secret. She didn't get arrested. She didn't disappear. You saw her at the airport. She collapsed in your arms. And then what happened?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. When she collapsed in my arms just before we left, she collapsed because we knew that we would never see each other again. You know, it's not simply a wall that's up there. That wall represented a division between two separate worlds. And we had no hope of ever seeing each other again. And it was an awful, awful scene. But then a year and a half later, that wall came a-tumbling down. And 1 month later, Frank and I invited her and her family to come over. They stayed with us for 2 weeks over Christmas. And of course, guess where we took them?
Where? Come on, tell us.
The happiest place in the world, Disneyland. But it was a wonderful thing to see her again.
Did they get used to the American toilets?
Very quickly. Very quick. And our toilet paper, too. But that's another story.
That's another story. We won't go into the toilet paper thing. All right. So happy ending there. Congratulations on being so thoughtful that you and Frank invited her and her family over for Christmas celebration. Did they go back? Did they go back to East Germany?
They do. She lives there. She's very, very happy. Her family, they're doing
free.
well.
Now they're free.
They're free.
Freer, certainly. Freer.
But one of the things that was difficult for them was this idea of, the rights, self-reliance.
Yeah.
And suddenly they went from, subsidized housing, subsidized food, subsidized everything to having to take responsibility. That was tough at first, as we all know, for East Germany.
Yeah.
West Germany had to do a lot of work to get them back up to speed.
Well, they had 40 years of it.
40 years of living in romper room with a mean headmaster.
I want to shift gears a little bit. There was an article that I reviewed with you in the green room, and it's from the Heritage Foundation, and it's written by Arthur Minich. And the title of the article is How Big Tech is Using Freedom of Expression, in quotes, in order to squash, quote, freedom of speech. And the article is quite interesting because it presents a new battlefront, a new front line on our battle to preserve our Bill of Rights. And the article documents how Facebook and Google are in the process of trying to convert the American definition of free speech to the European definition of free speech. And I'd just like to read a part of the article. You can jump online, folks, if you want to follow along or read it later. And it's called How Big Tech Uses Freedom of Speech to Quash Free Speech. I'm just going to read this last. A Google internal memo leaked in 2018 called The Great Censor, CENSOR, shows the company's skepticism about freedom of speech, claiming it has become a social, economic, and political weapon. That's in quotes. Obviously, free speech has always been a social, economic, and political weapon. So the idea of it becoming such is rather strange because it's always been. And that's the very basis. That's why you have free speech, is so that you can use it as a social, economic, and political weapon against your adversaries. Though the memo compares the American tradition to the European tradition, saying that America prioritizes free speech for democracy, not civility, while European tradition favors dignity over liberty and civility over freedom. What's your take on that, Celeste?
First, that last statement sends a chill up my spine. It truly does. Mm-hmm. I don't see free speech so much as a weapon as it is a tool. Mm-hmm. Our founders intended free speech to mean civil speech, mm-hmm. a means through which the citizenry could engage in debates mm-hmm. over the issues that affect the republic. Mm-hmm. Civil speech, mm-hmm. not screaming at one another. Mm-hmm. And it's also free speech. You know, we talk about we the people. We don't see ourselves as just I, me. It's we the people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How does what we do, our actions, how does that affect the republic itself, both present but more importantly in the future? Mm-hmm. And I find this very, very dangerous mm-hmm. when I hear about people willing to give up liberties in order to feel more comfortable mm-hmm. or safe. Mm-hmm.
Or nice.
Or nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the nice thing really gets to me.
Yeah, nice. They tried that in the Soviet bloc, mm-hmm. and it didn't work very well.
Well, it's interesting that in the article, the author, Arthur Milich, head of research for the Heritage Foundation, what he does is he drills down into what Google and Facebook mean by freedom of expression. And instead of having me read the whole article, let me characterize it. According to Facebook and according to Google, and I suppose, although I do not know, Twitter and other YouTube, where people are demonetized or kicked off these social platforms because they engage in free speech. The reason that the social media giants are trying to redefine what we mean by free speech by substituting this word free expression. Let me give you an example. Suppose Mark McIntire was on Facebook. I no longer am on Facebook, but suppose I decide I'm going to go back on Facebook, and I'm going to create a unique self-identity. That's what they mean by free expression, a unique self-identity as the emperor of the universe. Suppose I go on Facebook and I put up a page, Mark McIntire, Supreme Eternal Emperor of the Universe. And I demand that everybody obey whatever I say because, after all, I'm the emperor of the universe. So all laws have to be changed according to me. All statutes have to be ripped down. All books have to be burned that I don't like. That's what Facebook and Google mean by free expression. And their argument is really interesting. Their argument is that if you, Celeste Barber, or anybody else, were to go on my Facebook page and read this nonsense, this lunacy, and if you posted a comment saying, "Oh, Mark McIntire is a lunatic. He's deranged. He belongs in a lunatic asylum," you could be disciplined by these social media platforms because you are inhibiting my free expression to tell the world that I self-identify with a unique identity as the moral den mother of the universe. That's what they're trying to do.
It's an accommodation for the absurd.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
That's well put. It's a accommodation for the absurd. Yeah, that's pretty much what they're trying to do. They're trying to accommodate the fact that we have now crossed this Rubicon where mere accusation is sufficient in place of evidence.
Oh, we see it across the country, from the White House, the way the president is treated, on down to ordinary citizens. And it's a danger to this country. It's an affront to the principles laid out in the Bill of Rights, specifically freedom of speech in this country, which is, again, civic speech, engaged speech.
Yeah, when I first watched the confirmation hearings for Gorsuch,
Oh, character assassination.
and then I saw the ones for Kavanaugh, and I saw that mere accusation, no evidence, no police report, no reliable witnesses, no forensic, nothing, but just some woman saying he tried to rape me was deemed sufficient by the media and by the Academy to deny this person a spot on the Supreme Court, only because his ideology was not their ideology.
But it didn't work.
Thank God it didn't work. Thank God it didn't work.
We have a constitution, and that still works.
Yes, and we have people,
and it protected him.
And we have people who will vote for the Bill of Rights.
Exactly.
All right. So we're coming up to, I think, our last segment. Yeah, we are. We're coming up to our last segment, which we're going to give you a little more time to prepare for. The question will be, what is the legacy for democracy that we should be giving to our children? I am Mark McIntire. This is Voices of Santa Barbara, KZSB AM 1290. And we are back here at KZSB AM 1290. Thanks again for joining us on Voices of Santa Barbara. We're going to save at least 1 minute at the end of the show for you to reread that event that's happening on July 4th, gathering of people who are just proud to be an American. Just
Yankee Doodle.
Yeah, Yankee Doodle, exactly. And so I'll have Celeste do that. But my final question, since this is our legacy segment, as an educator, as a writer, as a defender of the Bill of Rights, what do you think is the legacy that we should be leaving for future generations? Or maybe we already are. I don't know. I don't want to prejudice you.
I'm a very optimistic person.
Why is that? Why is that?
I don't know. It's just the way I'm hardwired. I guess it's the XX chromosome. I don't know what it is. It's something about me.
All right.
I'm an optimistic person, and I believe we are already doing that, and it's through the grassroots movement that it's just growing in this country. And I see it as beginning in the spring of 2016. It was the primary election. A lot of people focus on, the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, that standoff. But look at what happened. Remember what happened that spring. Donald Trump was one of, 17?
17 candidates.
17 candidates. He didn't have as much money as most of them. I think the favorite was supposed to be Jeb Bush. That's where the money was. All of the other 16 or 17 candidates were rejected. And who were they rejected by? Ordinary Americans who were fed up with the status quo and said, enough is enough. Rejected all of them. And some of them were good men, good politicians. Some of them I like quite a bit, including Jeb Bush, was a good, decent man. But they rejected him. And to this day, I don't believe President Trump has lost a single supporter. You can see that by his rallies. This dissatisfaction with politicians, the status quo, the establishment, that dissatisfaction seems to be growing, taking on strength, despite California being a blue state. We see it elsewhere in the country. The American people are taking their country back. I think that's a wonderful thing. It's what the founders intended. So keep it up, folks. And one way you can do it is, again, by coming to the 4th of July parade and participating. Take pride in your country. Take visible pride in your country.
Right. Going to meet at noon at Mitchell Terena and State Street. Bring a flag, bring a white shirt, blue pants, and the rest is going to be history. You're going to march with your fellow. Don't even have to be a citizen, as a matter of fact.
We welcome everybody.
Exactly. Welcome everybody. Why do you think there was such a revolution at the ballot box in favor of Donald Trump? I mean, a lot of people, myself included, think that his tone and his mannerisms are not exactly what I would enjoy, being a Bostonian, and he's a New Yorker, But why did the country seem to rise up and give enough electoral votes to elect this man? And is there some instinctive button that was pushed that the pollsters and the professional politicians totally missed out on?
He spoke directly to the American people. Mm-hmm. Remember that Hillary Clinton, she had boutique rallies on Cape Cod and in Hollywood and Beverly Hills. The press was not invited. He got up close to the American people. He looked them in the face and he said, folks, this is what I'm going to do for you. Mm-hmm. And he was honest, and that was refreshing to the American people. Mm-hmm. I think that's all they want from their politicians. Be upfront, be honest, respect us. Don't lie to us. Talk to us as though you are an equal citizen to us, which is what it was intended originally, not an elite class. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's something to this instinct. I know we've got less than 30 seconds here before the news rolls in on us. Yeah, we've got 1 minute. But I think I think you're right. I think that there is something instinctive about non-academic working Americans that they just, when they smell a dead fish, they can smell a dead fish, and they know a good fish from a bad fish, and they rise up, and they've done it. They've done it many, many times,
again and again.
Tell us again about the event on July 4th.
One more time, Yankee Doodle Dandy, folks, come on out to the Santa Barbara 4th of July parade, noontime, Mitchell, Terrena, and State. And join the folks in March in Pride. All
right. And that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Celeste Barber for being our special guest, and hope to see you all on the 4th of July. Bye-bye.